Welcome to the podcast, Creating Value in Travel and Transportation, hosted by Landry Holy, CEO and founder of Fairval. In this podcast channel, we will exchange with entrepreneurs, industry experts, financial institutions, and investors on how they contribute to creating value in various travel verticals, thanks new innovative tech solutions and financial services. So, if you have an interest in travel retailing, hospitality, urban mobility, maritime, aviation and space tech, then this podcast is for you.
Hello everyone, and welcome to this new episode of our podcast, Creating Value in Travel and Transportation. The eVTOL industry represents the cutting-edge intersection of technology and air transportation, focusing on electric vertical takeoff and landing aircrafts poised to revolutionize urban mobility. It encompasses a range of aircraft designed for efficient, sustainable, and flexible travel within cities, reducing congestions and emissions. Despite such exciting perspectives, many questions are often raised about the future of such innovative sector. For example, what is the feasibility in terms of mass deployment? What is the respective economic viability? And simply, will these new services be accepted by city authorities and local populations? To step a bit backwards and grasp a global perspective of what is really happening, we have with us today Jason Pritchard, Executive Editor at eVTOL Insights, which is now recognized as one of the leading sources of news, information, and analysis in the eVTOL sector. Jason, hello. Really thrilled to have you with us today.
Thank you so much for having me, Landry. Really looking forward to our conversation, covering a lot of topics, so thank you for having me.
Well, let's start then by sharing a bit more about your background and your role within eVTOL Insights.
Yeah, thanks, Landry. So, hi, everyone. So, my name is Jason Pritchard, as Landry kindly did in his introduction as well. My background, media and communications. So, I've been doing this for more than 10 years. So, cut my teeth as a journalist. So, started off on the regional newspapers. Always liked sort of being that person that can tell that unique story that can be read by hundreds, thousands, and eventually with social media now taking an active role in people's lives, seeing that message transpire and sort of go off to a lot of people reading the sort of the stories that you want to talk about as well. Going backwards a little bit as well, I've always been fascinated with aviation. So when going on holidays with my parents and my family, always got the excitement of seeing the aircraft in the air, on the sort of the taxi and the when the plane was going off when I was younger, and even being now in my adult with my family. I live very close to Heathrow Airport here in London, so it's always nice to go and traveling past Heathrow and seeing in the air, without obviously driving safely, of course, but seeing which airlines are traveling across the in the air as well. So that will lead nicely in, I'm sure, Landry, kind of to eVTOL Insights and the aviation background as well. But that gives you a bit of background from my side. So being in media communications, newspaper, public relations, and communications as well. So doing that for 10 years, wonderful industry, and very glad to now then use all of that I've learned into the wonderful advanced air mobility market.
Well, great. I didn't know you were that passionate. So you're looking at each plane, your airplane.
I'm learning very quickly in terms of what to recognise between an Airbus A380 and a 777. So I'm not quite there yet. I've got other friends in the industry that are very good at trying to spot it. But I think it's just I have got no engineering background, so I did all my qualifications and my professional sort of academic educational career was all journalism. For the, a little bit of a sort of off topic as well. Very keen on ancient Egypt, so that can be a different subject in itself as well. But seeing how the engineering feats work and seeing the aircraft as you're sort of on them or even on the ground and seeing them fly into the air as well, it boggles the mind that we as a society can create these aircrafts that can travel at speeds the way they are, carrying people at vast distances, and then to now be in an era where we could be doing that in a smaller scale, but in the same way, doing the same thing for cities and regions and other use cases, of which we'll talk about in more detail, is fascinating. So, yeah, I'm not going to say I know all the ins and outs of an aircraft, but seeing them in the air is a joy to behold.
Well, really, really, really interesting. So let's now dive into eVTOL Insights. So what is eVTOL Insight mission? What are the type of domains you cover, and primary, services which are offered through eVTOL Insights?
Yeah, thanks ever so much, Landry, and really appreciate the kind introduction at the start as well. So, for those of your audience that aren't familiar, eVTOL Insights, as you very kindly said, one of the leading industry news outlets for the global advanced air mobility market as well. So, while we have eVTOL in our name, we cover the whole advanced air mobility space as well. So, we do stories every day, whether it's about the eVTOL OEM, so the likes of the Jobies, the Archers, the Lilium, the Volocopters of the world as well, those that are building aircraft to then certify in the next couple of years. We do everything from sort of the infrastructure side of things as well, battery regulations, frameworks, to also the unmanned aircraft. I think the unmanned aircraft and the beyond visual line of sight, those applications are still so important for the eVTOL market and the advanced air mobility and the use cases as well. So going back, eVTOL Insights, we do daily news, we do weekly podcasts as we are on here at Landry. It's very nice to be in the other chair as opposed to being the one that's asking the questions as well. But they've been brilliant. Like in this instance too, we speak to industry leaders on a weekly basis where they can share their insights on the industry, where they see it going, but also kind of answer some of the questions on what they're doing with their relative companies, but also where they see the market going, because it's a fascinating time to be in this market and predicting, I wish we had a crystal ball, of where that future might look like as well. But apart from that, we also do our industry events too. So if you don't mind me saying, we do a various of industry conferences every year. And until recently, we do also the networking events at the air shows too. So to give you a perspective, we've done conferences in London, in New York and Singapore. We've recently come back from the Singapore air show to do what we used to call, behind closed doors. And these are the private, invite-only exclusive networking events, bringing the industry together before these big air shows as well. And that's one of the bits of feedback we had from our conferences, is that everyone really loves the idea of networking and getting everyone in one room, sharing ideas, exchanging business cards, and just chatting and learning from several thought industry leaders as well. So we've done that in Singapore earlier. We're going to be at the Farnborough Air Show on the 21st of July. And then for our main industry conference this year, we're delighted to be coming to Montreal in Canada. Canada's a wonderful country. I've never been before myself, but the promise of advanced air mobility is so much so that our delegates from our New York conference said you have to do a conference there as well. Worth noting, third biggest aerospace hub in the world behind Seattle and Toulouse. So it makes sense for us to do a conference there. So that's happening on May the 1st and 3rd. So that all the details are on our website, evtolinsights.com as well. So already, Landry, you can see, news, podcasts. We do videos, which are on our YouTube channel as well. We also do our events. And then finally, we do our special reports. Now, these are reports that get released every quarter. So recently, we did the Power Book in January that recognizes the thought leaders, influencers, and innovators. That was really well received. And that's one that everyone wants to be in as well, and to see that they are championing all the work that they're doing. We also have a CTO, or Chief Technology Officer report, that's going to be in Q2. We have a Women in eVTOL one, which was really well received. And this is something that we at eVTOL Insights are really passionate about as well. This is such a wonderful industry, but it's very keen that we make sure that we are doing everything we can to be diverse, open, equality, sharing, and recognizing that there are just as many amazing women in this space as there are amazing men as well. Aerospace is, unfortunately, at the moment, quite a male-dominated space. But what can we be doing in our capacity to showcase and recognise those celebrations as well? So that's in Q3. And then finally, Q4, we've got our Ones to Watch special report as well. So this is those the young and the ones that are really making their first start into their industry and the career as well. So we'd like to cover the whole basis as well. And then finally, we've got our WhatsApp signal channels, so daily news that are coming through via your phone. We know everyone's busy, so having the news at their fingertips for our WhatsApp channel has been very well received as well. And we've got nearly 350 subscribers to that as well. So I think I've exhausted it already, Landry, but you can quite clearly see we do news, videos, podcasts, special reports, industry events, those news channels on WhatsApp and Signal as well as our socials, LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. So we really want to be banging the drum and have our fingers on the pulse of this growing emerging market. And we started in 2020, and we've kind of been on a rocket ship ever since to where we are now.
Wow, very impressive. And I was very excited to, when I was preparing this podcast with you, because you really have that global view of what is happening, and you're talking to all those leaders. So, you have the heartbeat of the industry. So, which brings me to that next question is, I'm going to ask you something which is not easy to do, to achieve, but I'm sure you'll achieve that marvelously. It's really to understand what is this eVTOL industry in a nutshell. Its definition, scope, some significant facts or figures, main players, just painting a bit this industry so that we all are on the same page, and then can carry on to deep dive on some more aspect of it.
Of course, no, thanks, Landry. And it's a question that you could have hours and hours to talk about as well. This is something that I'm really passionate about as well, and something at eVTOL Insights that we really cherish as well, to be able to share with the world what's going on in the different regions. So there's lots of things that happen in the US, lots of things that happen in here in the UK and in Europe, in Asia Pacific, also where the Middle East, of which, as you said, we will talk in more details as well. So advanced mobility, or electric vertical takeoff and landing, electric eVTOL aircraft. This is in regards kind of the next era of aviation. We have the jet aviation, where the commercial jet and the conventional engines in sort of the 60s and 70s. Now we're moving forward to electric aviation. A lot of focus from countries, governments, regions, and I guess just the aviation industry as a whole, looking to decarbonize the industry as well. There's a lot of focus on reducing fossil fuels, reducing our environmental impact as well. And electric aviation is certainly one of those segments as well. In terms of advanced mobility and eVTOL aircraft, I think it kind of, from us at eVTOL Insights, it kind of started really from Uber Elevate's white paper, which was published in October 2016. For those of you who haven't already read it, I suggest you do, because they really helped to lay the foundations for this urban aerial transportation method. So the idea of getting an aircraft from one part of the city to another, from an airport to the city centre, to, essentially from unlocking that travel. And it's so that was in October 2016. Fast forward 4 years, and Uber Elevate division of Uber was acquired by Joby Aviation. Everyone will know Joby, one of the real key players in this industry, and we'll talk in more detail about them soon. They bought that in 2020 to bring and consolidate all of their Uber Elevate and all the learnings they've had it as well. As part of that white paper, it was looking in all the various cities. And this is the beauty of it, Landry, is that there's so many cities in this world that have different challenges and different opportunities as well. And one of them is the congestion side of things. So we know if any of you or any of the audience have gone to New York and flown and landed in JFK, the journey from JFK into Manhattan is an absolute nightmare. It takes probably up to an hour, maybe more with the congestion as well. One of the use cases that Archer has suggested, or certainly one of the industry has suggested, is maybe having an eVTOL aircraft or a shuttle service that goes from JFK into Manhattan, a journey that potentially estimated could take you about 20 minutes. So it's unlocking the idea that you can come out of the cars, avoid the congestion. And it's worth noting, though, that eVTOL aircraft, it won't solve congestion overnight. It's really offering an alternative method of transport that allows you to have that hour where you can meet up with friends. You can put your daughter to bed at night from work. Allows you to have that time that you might not have at the moment because of the congestion side of things as well. So eVTOL aircraft is a really sustainable way of traveling. And I think also, really more importantly as well, Andrew, is the safety element. We'll talk, I know, in a little bit more detail about kind of what this will inevitably replace. You've got the public acceptance. This is a new type of aircraft that we haven't certified before. Yes, the EASA, the European Civil Aviation Authority, they've certified Pipistrel's Velis Electro, which is the first electric aircraft a couple of years ago. Great news, but we've not certified a plane like this before as well. So we're all still learning and all still getting to the idea as well. The good thing also as well, with the likes of Joby and Archer that are doing a lot of work with advanced air mobility in their own aircraft, it's getting a lot of mainstream attention as well. So you've got the likes of CBS, you've got the likes of CNB, CCN, Fox News over in the US, certainly in the UK, a lot of media outlets are reporting on this, and it's getting a lot of interest from the public, but also it's bringing up a lot of questions. Well, how will this fly? How is this going to be regulated with the other aircraft? Are we going to have a Star Wars or a Fifth Element where you've got hundreds and hundreds of aircraft flying amongst each other at great pace? That's sort of all a little bit far-fetched at the moment, but it's important for us as the industry to allay any fears, allay any concerns, because one of those is that this is going to be a wealthy, for the elite, it's going to be X amount of money, and it's not going to be for all walks of life. To an extent, yes, it will be a little bit more expensive than anyone would like to hope as well in the first instance, but that's only because when it starts to scale up, when you've got more of them on essentially up in the air, the price will come down. So I know I've kind of skirted along round it as well. The advanced air mobility market, Landry, is in 2023 estimated to be worth $8 billion. In 2024, that's going to grow to $9 billion, and is estimated by 2050 the whole market could be worth $90 billion. So a lot of companies are looking to get a slice of this lucrative pie as well. For example, Toyota invested in Joby, Stellantis invested in Archer. Toyota and Stellantis, two of the biggest automotive companies in the world as well. So you've got examples being the likes of Microsoft that are invested in the space with a company called Vertical Airspace in the UK as well. You've got other companies that are Suzuki in Japan that are investing in SkyDrive. So already those examples you're seeing a lot of companies that we need to get into this, and we need to get into it quickly as well. So advanced air mobility is there's a lot of acronyms being thrown around. So eVTOL, AAM, UAM, urban air mobility. So it's a real wonderful market as well. There's still a lot of challenges and from that side of it as well. But I wanted to sort of stress that it is not just one region where advanced mobility is going to have the idea as well. Is, as I said, Joby, Archer, the likes of Whisk that are invested by Boeing. You've got Overair, Beta Technologies over in the US. In the UK and Europe, you've got Vertical Aerospace that are here in the UK in Bristol. Airbus, we know Airbus, the big aerospace company. They've just released their next gen City Airbus prototype and plan to be flight testing at the end of this year. You've also got the likes of Lilium, Volocopter, Ascendance Technologies in Toulouse in France as well that are building aircraft too. And then you've got sort of further afield in the Middle East. So we'll talk a little bit more detail in future, Landry, but I know one of the big announcements that was in the last couple of weeks is Joby Aviation and a company called Skyports Infrastructure that build the final approach and takeoff pads, or vertiports as we call them. They want to launch operations in Dubai as early as 2026. So I know one of the questions will be kind of, when's it going to happen? When's it going to be? A lot of groundwork is already being in place now. It's up to us as the industry to make sure we're all on the same path and the same place for when that does happen, but also really importantly to bring the public on that journey with us as well. So I'm really excited. You can tell I'm kind of sort of very passionate about this too. So it's a lucrative market. I think a lot of companies will be coming into the space in the next couple of years, where we start to see the jostling for places and position of where they want to be in the industry too. So it's a wonderful market, and I think there's a lot of challenges and a lot of opportunities to come in the near future too. So I hope that kind of gives you an idea of kind of where we are with the market. Thank you.
It's very exciting, and as you were talking about Star Wars, I was smiling because I was thinking, I'm a bit older than you, but when I was a kid, I used to watch those science fiction films, and one of the cool things that was like, wow, is you could actually have a device where you could talk to someone live, and we were like, wow, that's really far away. And look what we're doing today. So
exactly, and I mean, loads of people calling, it's the age of the Jetsons, where we can have these flying cars or electric air taxis, and we can go from one position to the other as well. It's brilliant. And even talking to my friends and family, they're like, so what, you're telling me I can get an air taxi or an eVTOL aircraft from where we are? I'm based in Farnborough, it's sort of near where the air show is, to the coast, or I can go from here to London, or I could go from Heathrow to the centre of London in 12 minutes on one of these aircraft. So the possibilities are endless. It's just, again, it's a case of making sure that we are doing everything right. And it's worth noting, and I know you know as well, Andrew, aviation, it's one of the most heavily regulated industries in the world. They are going to be safe to the 10 to the -9, 10 to the -8. They are regulated, and because again, one of the questions is are they safe? How far are they going to be traveling above our houses? Where's the privacy concerns, the public acceptance? How this all going to pan out? I don't have the answers to all these questions, but I think it's fascinating to know that there's loads of companies that are working to make this happen too. And it's here. It will happen. It's not a case of if, it will happen.
Yeah. So the burning question then, as you alluded, is, and it's quite important from an investment perspective, is when is it going to happen really? I mean, again, I ask this question all the time because you have different perspective, and not just people, outside the industry, but people actually, working on some projects. And I have some kind of a large spectrum. And as you're exposed to all those people on a regular basis, what's kind of your, resume or outline that you can share with us in terms of range of timelines that are rather realistic?
Yeah, absolutely, Landry. So this is a question that everyone's always asking. When's it going to happen? When are we going to see the first aircraft take off and land at a vertiport to a city? And I think also the question is where. The US are making excellent progress as well. Joby Aviation are step 3 of 5 when it comes to certifying their aircraft to the Federal Aviation Administration. But it's also worth noting in China, EHang, who are again doing a lot of work in China, they achieved their type certificate from the Civil Aviation Administration of China, or the CAAC. Now, we'll talk about harmonization later, but there's a lot of sort of differences between what the FAA are certifying and what the CAAC are certifying as well. So there's a real, I kind of say, space race, or sort of race to sort of be the first to get it done as well. And again, going back onto the certification and the regulatory side of things, it won't be certified until it's absolutely, all the boxes have been ticked and it's safe to do so. The question comes then to sort of when is it going to happen? For me personally, I definitely think we could see sort of operations within 2026. I think that's feasible. How much? It's not going to be like the Jetsons or the Fifth Element, where we see hundreds and hundreds of operations. I had a really interesting chat with Duncan Walker, who's the CEO of Skyports Infrastructure, and who I talked with about this announcement we made in Dubai as well. So they are building the vertiports next to Dubai International Airport, one of the busiest airports in that region. Joby are building their aircraft, going to be certifying. They've said they were quite aggressive on their timeline, and have even said they want to try and get it up and in the air by 2025 as well. So 2025, 2026 is kind of the sort of the sort of North Star where people want to be certified as well. I think the industry was a little bit naive in terms of how long it would certify, because when the white paper was released in 2016, a lot of people were thinking, it could be 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023, and we're now starting to see it again a little bit pushed back as well. But in the grand scheme of things, I think that's fine, because you would rather push it back, and yes, people want to get it flying, want to see it up in the air, and the investors want that return on that investment that they put in. But you'd want it, especially if you're going to be carrying passengers at quite frequent levels, you would much rather wait a year, 18 months for it to be certified and completely happy with it than you would rush it through. Not that that would be the case for this industry too as well. So I would say sort of 2026 from my perspective, just to allow, because it's also important as well, it's not just the aircraft that we need to certify as well, it'll be the electrification of the vertiports infrastructure as well. It takes an incredible amount of energy to charge an aircraft to the level that we want to do for the operations. Then also, you've got to bring the government on board as well, with the local authorities, the planning permissions, the building of the sites. They're also the energy off-boarding, off-grid. The challenge is, well, if we use all the energy to go into this vertiport, is that going to affect other services within the city that are doing it if we're using it off the grid as well? So that's a challenge as well. A lot of moving parts that need to put in place, but 2026 I think is a realistic sort of target based on what we're seeing in the industry as well. I think, and it's also worth noting that Wisk, so this is the company that are working on, I believe, the only autonomous eVTOL aircraft. So it won't have a pilot, it'll have a ground test center on the floor. I'd like to say we probably wouldn't see autonomous operations until probably the start of the next decade, so maybe 2030 as well. I've been proven wrong in the past. It might be sooner than that, but I just think the general consensus is autonomy is still a lot of challenges with that as well. A lot of great work is being done in this industry, but if I'm being honest, I'd say 2026 for sort of day one operations, eVTOL passenger carrying services, and then maybe 2030 for the sort of the autonomy, those unmanned pilot. But then that brings up a lot of questions as well, because would people want to fly in an aircraft if there's no pilot on board and it's controlled on the ground as well? So yeah, that's another podcast for another day, I'm sure, as well. So I would say it's well within the next sort of 2 to 3 years at least.
Okay, which brings me to the next question, which is what are the likely first use cases to come? First thing we think about is helicopters replacement, but you just hinted something which was quite interesting on the unmanned eVTOLs, because actually you could imagine that on routes which are where there's not a lot of traffic and so on, this could be leveraged. And as well, I'm not thinking about a passenger being transported in an eVTOL, but cargo basically. So that could bring us maybe even earlier than the beyond 2030. So what's the use cases that when you talk to those eVTOL developers, they are really aiming for realistically in this next horizon?
Yeah, really good question, Andrew. And it's always a question that we always like to try and sort of weigh up as well. The general consensus, I believe, with this too, is that passenger carrying services will happen. But in terms of the safety case, what better way to then use and test the technology by using it unmanned first? So if I can just go back a couple of years as well, so some of the trials that have done in the UK and also further afield as well was when we had the COVID-19 pandemic. Unmanned aircraft was an absolute great way of testing the technology, and Skyport's drone services as well. They were using unmanned drones to make a journey to remote islands in Scotland. Now, this is a journey typically that would take a car or a truck carrying those medical products hours to do. A journey with an unmanned aircraft can take 30 minutes. So what that technology proved is that you can do and transport these supplies very quickly. You can get the turnaround time in terms of testing as well, which was so important at that time as well. So the medical supplies is a really good use case as well, because for an example is United Therapeutics in Canada. I'm pretty confident, and I can't exactly remember the actual dates from it too, but they've transported live organs for an organ transplant from a drone from one hospital to another. We're only talking a matter of miles, but it just unlocks so much potential with this technology. Again, if you were to do that in an ambulance, it could take a while with the traffic and the congestion as well, and also the time that is spent outside of the body of the organ, it diminishes. So you want that organ to be as fresh as possible to then be carried out in an operation as well. And the same then can be said, going on while we're on the sort of medical side of things, that golden triangle. So the hour it takes from you to get to a hospital when you've had an accident. We never want to be involved in an accident, nor our loved ones as well. But the idea of using eVTOL aircraft to transport you from the scene of an accident to a hospital could be the difference between life and death. And I know there's companies, or a company in Switzerland, in Zermatt, Dufour Aerospace. They're building an aircraft because they're based in the Alps that can be used as medical evacuation. So that's a really good, interesting use case from that. The medical evacuation and the medical supplies as well. But as well as delivering it between sort of the sort of urban environments and maybe the island environments, I think also the medical supplies is a great example for Africa. And I think Africa has got so much promise as well, because separating the urban and the remote communities that again would take such a long time to get to them to provide medication or preventative medication sort of for malaria or any kinds of diseases that can be easily prevented and easily cured as well. Unmanned aircraft can unlock that and unlock that challenge too as well. And I know a German company called Wingcopter are doing a lot of work in Africa. I believe in Rwanda, in Sierra Leone, and even in the Polynesian sort of country of Vanuatu as well. So using the technology to utilize that. And we're not talking big aircraft as well. I think 20 kilograms that you can put medical supplies in as well. One coin I always had from one of our industry topics as well, one of our industry experts as well, said, if it's dull, dangerous, and dirty, so the 3Ds, get a drone to do it or get an unmanned aircraft to do it, because it saves lives. If it's dull, and you can use the person to then focus on other areas of the business as well. And if it's dangerous, you don't want a person to do it as well, because very easy to replace a drone than it is to replace a person as well. So that's one aspect, the medical sort of evacuation, medical supplies as well. Cargo, as you rightly pointed out as well, Landry, is a very good use case as well. We've seen in the industry the likes of FedEx, DHL, Amazon have tried sort of get into this market as well, and UPS as well. So the likes of, if you order something on Amazon or you order something on or any other good delivery sort of products as well, there's instances where you can have your groceries or you can have your item that you've ordered delivered to you via drone. Now, my garden isn't big enough, I think, for a drone to come down and land in the garden, but that's the idea of it, is that you can do things via your app and have it delivered essentially to your door as well. So that's another method that unlocks, again, the congestion, the transport, the time it takes for you to get that as well. And also testing that too. That's the great thing of it as well. If you're not using not using a pilot, but you can use it to, again, unlock the congestion corridors and the opportunities to transport a lot of goods in one go. If it's used by electric, it's taken the conventional diesel trucks off the road, reducing the carbon footprint. So it all goes around that circle of the circular economy and using stuff and making sure that we're doing everything we can to not put as much pollution on the world as well. So we've got medical evacuation, we've got medical services, we've also got cargo. Another one that's also doing a lot of work as well is the military. So in the US, Agility Prime is a sort of a sub-arm of the US Air Force that's doing a lot of work when it comes to utilizing eVTOL technology. A lot of companies have benefited from getting contracts that can do testing within the US Air Force, testing of the products, testing of the technology as well. So there is, there's scope in the future that eVTOL aircraft could very well replace the helicopters or the conventional planes that are being used for a host of military missions as well. So already there, Landry, you've got maybe 3 or 4 different sort of use cases as well. So it's unlocking the remote communities that might be switched off. So Canada is another good example where most of their population is congregated in, the likes of Vancouver, Ottawa, Toronto and Montreal. But as you go further into, Alberta, Saskatchewan, and territories like that, it becomes a little bit more difficult, and the roads become a little bit more difficult to pass if there's had heavy snowfall. So a lot of scope from the use cases as well. And then finally, aerial tourism and aerial sightseeing is a big thing in the Asia Pacific region too. Indonesia and around that area, you've got thousands of islands that are sort of nature spots, or very sort of really good attraction points as well. So eHang are doing a lot of work in China to sort of offer these sightseeing tours as well. And they're unmanned, but they're 20 minutes. But again, it's a way of bringing the public on board, showing them what this technology is like, what it could look like from the idea as well. And if that's going to bring people on board to say, you know what, this is a really accepted form of transport, to then we can open it up further and start small and build up big, that can only be a good thing for the industry as well. So I think that's kind of the use cases that we're seeing. So the aerial tourism, aerial sightseeing, the medical side of things, whether it is transporting medical supplies to actually using it as an air ambulance side of things, and then the cargo side delivering parcels or deliveries, and then the military side from the focus on the sort of the military side too as well. So already, as well as passenger carrying, we've got quite a lot of use cases that we can use this technology for.
Yeah, and as you were talking about the medical aspect, actually, was one company I was exchanging. There was also the use case of bringing actually the doctor to remote places.
Yes,
Instead of bringing. That's also one case, and which brings me actually, because we're talking about all those use cases in terms of how what value it brings. I like to come back about that value creation for the people, and taking an angle from a urban planning standpoint, because it changes a bit the equation if we're kind of now having those aircraft enabling us to commute more easily, and which is again going maybe against that trend of the mega cities and so on. So is there some some of the players really trying to have that prism, that approach of rethinking how their solution can really working in partnership with cities change a bit the way urban planning is being managed today?
Yeah, absolutely, Landry. So I think it's worth noting first of all that eVTOL aircraft isn't going to replace any kind of other transportation that we use. So bus, train, subway, metro, it's going to complement it as well. It's offering another option for people to travel as well. You're not going to use this every day. I think it would be very expensive to use an eVTOL aircraft on your daily commute every day. But if, as an example, here in the UK, if you're living in London and you want to take an eVTOL aircraft to the other side of London, we know London's very congested. It does take a while to get from one place to another. Or if you wanted to go from London to the coast, which on a good day, it could be a couple of hours, you can use an eVTOL aircraft to then make that trip as well. So that's a really good option. And that's something that Lilium, the German eVTOL aircraft company that are focused on, is this, rather than the shorter distances as well, they're focusing on regional air mobility. So their Lilium jet is that they're working on is going to be traveling a bit further than the likes of the Jobies and the Archers, but it allows you to travel further. So a perfect example being is if you wanted to travel from London to Oxford, or you wanted to travel from, for example, Paris in France down to sort of, maybe to Toulouse or to further afield, or sort of down to the coast as well. It allows you to do maybe those trips that would be a bit of a hassle trying to do on public transport as well. But you make a really good point then, Landry, with the city authorities, is they need to be included into the whole idea of it as well. We're not going to see vertiports like the London Underground, or certainly like the Metro in Paris, where you've got one stop, probably every 100, 150, 200 yards. They're going to be very scattered around. And it might even be that you only have less than half a dozen vertiports in one city as well. Worth just to sort of let everyone know as well, we've got the Paris Olympics this year. Very exciting time. Volocopter, another German eVTOL aircraft company, they are working to put in place vertiports within Paris to showcase what this advanced air mobility could look like as well. They coin it more as urban air mobility. The reason, to sort of avoid confusion, advanced air mobility for me is the whole ecosystem. So eVTOL aircraft, unmanned aircraft as well. Urban air mobility is just traveling within cities as well. So with Paris, they want a vertiport near the Palace of Versailles, which is an amazing tourist attraction as well. They want one near the River Seine, and sort of near, I believe, sort of maybe sort of around sort of like Notre Dame, or around that, at least in the city centre as well. The challenge there is, one of the Parisian councillors has said, absolutely not. We do not want that there as well. And Paris has also got formed because another form of urban mobility, e-scooters, were banned in the city as well. So you need to make sure that we're doing everything we can to bring advanced air mobility to the public and make sure they're on board with it as well. They're going to be the people that will use it. If they don't like it, then the industry is already on a bit of a backward foot as well. So the vertiports themselves are really key to make sort of that work. So if that, you can have the aircraft, but if you don't have the vertiports, it becomes very difficult for them to land itself as well. So it's bringing on board the knowledge and the education process, and I think that's so important as well. I've not read into too much detail about the Parisian councillor and what he's talking about it. I think he coined the kind of it's pointless, it's not useful, it's for the wealthy and elite as well. So what can we as an industry then do to kind of change that mindset as well? Because if that mindset then gets passed on to other effective users that will be using it, then we're kind of on a bit of a hiding as well. So I think it's really important with the city to learn, and what can we do, as I said, do we have these sort of go on a bit of a road tour or road show and show people a bit more about this as well. I think one thing in this industry we need to do is kind of bring those external stakeholders in to have those conversations with us, because I am confident they will have a lot of questions that we could answer, as well as we would have questions for them too. So in terms of the sort of the urban planners as well, it's a long time around to come to certain times of planning this thing. So we need to do this now as well. I'm conscious on the sort of the urban planner side, Landry. So I feel like I might have jumped a little bit around, but if there's anything else I can help onto that as well, I feel I might have jumped around a little bit. So happy to answer any other extra bits that on top of that too.
No, it's very interesting, and like you say, I think the good sign of in this industry is that we're really doing all the certification, safety first, which is the right way if you're serious about commercializing such a, activity or services. I remember some time ago when I was looking at some ventures in the e-scooter
Yes.
domain. So I had an investor asking me what I thought about, was it a good area to invest in? Apart from the fact that everyone could reproduce, I mean, it's not that easy to create a company, but reproduce the service. My issue was saying, well, the regulation, some are, jumping a bit too fast. I
Mm.
remember London had a quite, pragmatic approach, testing and so on, so you can have your own e-scooter. So I think it's all about that, because that had then a drawback, because in Paris we know that some people were killed by using those e-scooters, and so that creates kind of a, not only it could be banned, but more importantly people would not just adopt it, which is
Exactly.
what we want to avoid.
Mm.
So that's quite interesting. And last thing about, you mentioned about the Olympic Games. I was here, I mean, listening to an interesting interview of the CEO of ADP, Aéroport de Paris,
Mm.
and he was really cross with this decision. And I think it was a bit in the line what you were saying. Is like, okay, first of all, it was the opportunity to demonstrate that France was on the front runner in showcasing and potentially adopting this technology. But like you say, it's about showing to the audience, to the population, what it is, then how you use it. Is it going to be an exclusive service? Might be like helicopters, but like you say, there's a lot of use cases like medical and so on that could be leveraged as well.
Exactly.
So yeah, definitely. So which brings me to the next question is, as you're speaking to all those guys, um, and I know you don't have any shares in some of those players, but I mean, from realistically, I mean, and you could think in per use case, who are the ones who are going to likely be the front runners in terms of commercial operations? Because that's, you talked about volocopter. I know they're quite advanced, but
Mm.
if you had to do a kind of a group, a front runner group, who
Yeah.
would you name, list in that group?
Yeah, it's a question again we're always asking. People want to know who's going to be the first, and it's that that space race as to who's going to be the first one to do it as well. I think it's very easy to look in the industry and think, well, everyone's getting close as well, and it's great. I think one thing that's great to see is that there's each company is on their own journey to go to certification. That's the end goal. There's amazing developments, so we're getting every day or certainly every week, whether it's completed a Series A, completed a Series B, or Series funding. They've completed flight testing. They've released a new prototype. They've announced a new facility that they're building up as well. That is brilliant. We couldn't be happier, and we genuinely wish that the industry continues to go from strength to strength, which is great. Excuse me. I think if I was to categorize it in terms of which companies are going to be the first to go, I think it's very clear in the industry that two companies stand out. Joby Aviation and Archer are the two that are very much laser focused on the certification side of things as well. It's worth noting that Joby have recently completed stage 3 of the five-stage process with the Federal Aviation Authority. So they've done the certification basis, they've done the means of compliance, they've recently done the certification plans. All that's left to do now is the test and analysis and the show and verify. Still very, very big parts of what they're doing. Worth noting again, the manufacturing side of things, because great, once we've certified an aircraft, we need to build more of them, and we need to build them more at scale so we can then roll out the services we're doing as well. Joby has got and has purchased a facility at Dayton International Airport in Ohio. They've recognised that region it's got a lot of aviation history with the Wright brothers there too. But they've already got plans in place then to build facility. They've got the numbers of how much aircraft that they can build from 2025 or 2026, whenever they start commercial operations going forward. So they've got a lot of plans in place as well. They've been heavily backed, and they obviously went public so they're trading on the stock exchange as well. A lot of investment coming in from that as well. They've got a lot of media attention, which is great. But they've got also, again, the key companies that are investing in them as well. Toyota, and I think I might not have mentioned it before, but I think the one thing that's really good with the eVTOL space is they're drawing a lot of lines from the automotive sector as well about how do we scale up, like Toyota, one of the biggest automotive manufacturers in the world. How do they do it? Rather than it, I think at the time it's about 500 billion to build, certify, and develop an eVTOL aircraft. That's an incredible amount of money, and a company trying to do all of that on their own, it's an impossible task as well. So why not build in some of the stakeholders that are leaders in what they do to then sort of help them reach that end goal as well. So Joby, definitely one of the sort of front runners to certify their aircraft and begin commercial operations in the not too distant future as well. Archer, for that matter, as well, doing the very same thing. So not only too soon after Joby had announced they achieved stage 3, Archer had done the same as well. They're currently on their flight testing for their Midnight aircraft at the moment. In terms of sort of where they are with flight testing, I think Joby are doing, I think they're flying like 4 to 6 times a day from their base in Marina as well. Archer are still sort of ramping up their flight testing with Midnight, which is great. They've also secured a facility in Covington, Georgia, where they're going to build their 350,000 square foot facility as well. They've got a strong relationship with Stellantis. Again, Stellantis, a big automotive manufacturer as well. They've invested in them. They've got a strong relationship with the battery manufacturers as well. So it makes perfect sense for Archer to team up with Stellantis to enable that sort of fast tracking of aircraft as well. Adam Goldstein, Archer's CEO and founder, very keen to get this facility in Covington open by 2024, so it's on track with their targets of operating the aircraft as well. Because again, it goes back to the investors, Landry. They're probably asking them, when's it going to happen? When is it going to happen? When's it going to happen? So they've got really aggressive targets that they're going to achieve, and I think the industry is all wishing them well to do that. So I'd put them two as the main two that are out there as well. As I mentioned at the start, though, we've got the likes of Beta Technologies. Although they're not necessarily eVTOL, they're sort of eSTOL or electric standard takeoff and landing. They're doing great work with their Alia aircraft and have been introducing electric charging for aircraft along the East Coast. So sort of in Vermont, in Massachusetts, way down to sort of Mississippi and Alabama as well. So I'd like to give them a mention as doing a lot of really great work in the US side as well. It's worth mentioning EHang, as I mentioned, in China. They've got the type certificate from the CAAC. They're doing a lot of work, I think, in Wuhan. They've got a lot of production facilities already there as well. I know there's a lot of geopolitical issues between the US and China, as understandably, but you cannot not understand the accomplishments that they've done. They've got the things in place, and China, it's one of the most populous countries in the world as well. And where they want to start operations, in Shenzhen and Zhuhai, the Greater Bay Area, that's about 40% or maybe even 60% of the world's population altogether. So if they set up operations in China, they've pretty much got most of the market there for APAC. So I think it's worth noting EHang in that category. And I know there's a lot of people might have some say on the sort of the technical side on the aircraft comparison between, for example, the Jobies and the Archers, which are the tilt rotor, and EHang, which is more sort of the multi-copter side of things as well. So EHang, I definitely think, worth their credit with what they're doing in the US as well. You've also got the likes of Supernal. So Supernal is previously Hyundai Motor Group, again, another automotive manufacturer that are working into that side as well. Also, you've got Eve Air Mobility, a sort of a spin-off from Embraer. They've got the biggest backlog in eVTOL aircraft, so I think 2,850. They've got sort of the likes of, in terms of Joby, you've got excuse me. In terms of Joby, you've got Delta Airlines that are investing in them. With Archer, you've got United. With Vertical Aerospace, you've got American Airlines that are over in the UK. Vertical are sort of doing their flight test campaign as well. So, excuse me, you've got a lot of companies within the space that are doing flight testing and have got aggressive timelines and have got key partnerships with that as well. And then, of course, as you mentioned as well, Volocopter, although they haven't gone public or done a public backing like the likes of Lilium, Eve, Archer, Joby, for example, they're raising funds. They're doing a lot of work in Japan, also in sort of the APAC region as well. It's worth noting as well, the Osaka World Expo is in 2025. So as well as the 2024 Olympics, Volocopter want to take an active presence there as well. So they recognize that Japan and sort of the APAC region is a really big market for them as well. So yeah, I would say there's at least probably a dozen companies that are doing well at the moment. A lot of talk at the moment, though, is that consolidation. And I know we'll talk about it in a little bit of time as well, Landry. But if I was, of course, with every kind of company that is on the public stock market, do your research, and yeah, that's kind of what I would say. I mean, it's wonderful from my perspective because we can see all the companies doing the various bits that they're doing as well. So yeah, I'm not a betting man. I've got no stocks, but it's nice to sit in my chair and look at afar at what everyone else is doing.
Yeah, so it's very interesting because as you were speaking, we see that a lot of those, front runners, they're really backed with, serious players, big players, which are leaders in their domains. And it comes across that what we're actually talking now is the future of mobility as a whole, because we have car manufacturers, we have aircraft manufacturers, you have, service providers, and that comes back to the point you were, alluding around consolidation, because I don't think originally I had the question of consolidation of eVTOLs, but I think the question is not so much of eVTOLs, it's the consolidation of mobility. I mean, if you look at the Stellantis group, already is one sign in the ground transportation, but we can see that those guys, they're thinking now mobility, multimodal mobility. So do you see now with all those partnerships, some kind of mega group shaping up towards those mobility services, end-to-end services?
Yeah, I think absolutely, Landry. I think it's a really interesting point to make too, because a lot of the focus is on sort of kind of that complete journey as well. So you would take, and I know Supernal or Hyundai have got this idea that you would take an automotive sort of pod that would transport you around the cities as well. But wouldn't that be something that you would go from your home in one of these pods to the airport, take an eVTOL aircraft, land at your destination, and take another of those pods to where you're going to go as well? So it's a seamless journey that's urban mobility as well. I do think, and I know we talked about this before our podcast, where you see the likes of there's just two main brands that are there. So you've got like iOS and Android, or you've got Amazon and Google. That in the future could be a very, very feasible possibility. And I think at the moment now, in terms of consolidation, a lot of talk is about eVTOL design. So will we see in the next couple of years a main focus on the design side of an eVTOL? So if anyone looks at an eVTOL aircraft in the next 5 to 10 years, are they going to look at it and say, right, there's only like the tilt rotor or the multicopter or or one main design as well? So that's a trending topic at the moment that's quite interesting to look at as well. But when it comes to urban mobility, I think definitely I know the city planners are quite keen to make sure that that's something that's in their vision going forward as well. I think it's going back to the point I made is advanced mobility will happen. So if cities don't plan now, they are going to be lost in the kind of the euphoria of it when it does happen, and the timelines that we talk about as well. As we mentioned with Paris and e-scooters, I know there's the bikes, the electric bike, or the bikes, sorry, that are in London, and they get used from time to time as well. But I think it's also bringing everyone involved to sort of ensure that they do use the various mobilities involved, and again, just going away from the likes of the cars and the decarbonisation of things as well. So I think urban mobility is going to be real front and center of a lot of people's minds, and eVTOL aircraft will of course play a massive part in that as well. Again, the price cost and the sort of the challenges with that, of it integrating it into the airspace within the cities, that's a challenge in itself. But I think absolutely cities need to have that planning in place to make sure, well, how are these going to fit in? And it's our job as an industry to make sure that we're having these conversations, but having them as early as possible as well. So I think it's a fascinating conversation, and I can definitely see that it sort of developing as we get closer to certification and eventual operation too.
Yeah, and you were mentioning about in France we like to think about the public services. We don't want to do something just for the most wealthy people, but thinking about it, if the public authorities are not in the discussion, I can see a really interesting play for people investing in real estate and getting all those grounds owned. And at some stage, when you talk about public services, you're going to have to go through those private guys, because it's going to be a real estate play at some stage, or even owning some parts of the air traffic. So that's why those guys need to be involved now, because they need to understand how they want this to be deployed and what control. Otherwise, you're going to end up like a mega, like we have in the platform domain. It's going to be a mobility platform with a physical and digital world combined together. So.
Exactly, and I think it's worth stressing as well, just really quickly, Andrew, that a lot of city governments and countries are very proactive. So the Middle East, the announcement we announced earlier with Skyports and Joby, Skyports were very, very high praise of Dubai, and when they went to the sign-in ceremony, they had the ruler of Dubai there, they had a lot of royal dignitaries there, as well as those from the Road Transport Authority, so the regulatory body, the Civil Aviation Authority. They want to make it happen, and they want to be the first to make it happen. So having that kind of back-in and a case where, right, this is what we want to achieve, this is when we want to do it, right, let's get down, let's get the players involved that we need to make it happen, and let's do it. So there's a lot of countries and regions that are really keen and encouraging to make it happen as well. Middle East is one of them. I know Japan are quite keen, and I know there's a lot of work being done there as well. Of course, the US, as we know, is doing a lot of work there as well. And having the events like the Olympics, and also in Australia, I think I think it's 2034. I might be wrong, but I know Brisbane, Australia's got the next Olympic Games in the next couple of years. Australia very much want air taxis to be part of the transportation for the Olympic Games as well. So, and if it's 2034, that's 10 years ahead now. So that's the kind of sort of lead time that we'd need to do to make sure this is it. And it would be wonderful, Landry, to have a conversation like what we're having now at that time point to see what's happened in that time space before as well. So I completely agree with you on the real estate side. And you might even see that when it comes to real estate and planning sort of cities as they get bigger, or even new cities, the vertiports will be part of that planning application as well. And when the planning applications do come in for vertiport, the district, the local, the federal councils are going to be like, what on earth is this? So it's part of that education process to make sure that they're fully aware. Doesn't lead to any delays with planning and stuff. In another life, I worked, with the newspapers. I did a lot of working on the planning in the councils, and these things take time. So the more information we can give them, the better. So I think we're in a good place, but we can certainly be doing more, and I know that's already been the case with most of the industry, at the moment.
And do you foresee, as we're talking about the role of the governments, geopolitical dimension out of those, incentive that those governments are trying to deploy?
Yeah, I think it's the geopolitical with of course with US and China. It's always a sort of a bit of a touchy subject with them as well. But I know with the with the US Air Force and the Agility Prime, they are heavily investing in this space as well. They want to be seen as the leaders, as at the forefront of that too, which is great. So there's a lot of money that's being put in from the US government from that too. For that, the same reason, the same in China. I know China's very keen to make sure that they are head and shoulders above the rest as well. So I would imagine any companies that would be going into China would be, I think, how I view it as well is that it would be a kind of, you teach us how we can, be that leader. And I imagine that would be the same with most countries as well, and most regions, is that going back to the Dubai sort of idea as well, is the air taxi operations with Joby in Dubai, and also recently announced with Archer Aviation, are also very keen to go into Dubai too, is what can we do, or the Dubai, the authorities in Dubai saying to like the likes of Archer and Joby or Skyports, what do you need from us to make it happen? And I think that's kind of the transparency that needs to happen with it all as well. So I think there's still a lot of learnings from, I think, both sides really from it all. We don't want to be a case of where we don't go to one country because of X, Y, and Z. We want this to be accessible to absolutely everyone. And yes, there will be cases where the eVTOL aircraft or these services will be operational in like a few areas or a few countries to start with. But the idea is start slow, replicate it in other different areas where it will work as well. So it would be great if we have China doing a similar sort of doing a model. It might be different to the US, and I'm sure it might be, but if they're bringing the benefits of advanced air mobility or eVTOL aircraft to the masses, and it can bring that overall overwhelming positive response, that then the government can go, wow, this company is really doing a lot of excellent work. How can we then replicate that blueprint to other areas? So from in the likes of California or in the likes of Miami or in New York, then to in China, in sort of like the up towards Shanghai and Beijing, Shenzhen, etc. as well. So that's kind of what I'm sort of seeing at the moment. It's a delicate subject, but I think it's a really interesting one to keep an eye on going forward.
Right. And just to carry on the aspect of deployment, so we have the government. Let's talk about now the safety, the certification bodies. We touched base quickly on it, and the major question is, what is happening there? Are we going to be able to scale further? Because I think the big challenge is how do we get those planes commercially operable, and that's a challenge today, because we want to be rigorous in the safety aspect, and there's so many things which are new, and not all the countries or regions are necessarily working in the same way or thinking the same way. So what's your takeaway from the recent discussion you had around that topic?
Yeah, sure, Landry. So certification is an absolutely paramount subject as well. And I think the key word that we came from our London conference when we had FAA, EASA, and sort of the UK Civil Aviation Authority is that harmonisation. So just without repeating too much, the authorities in the FAA and the EASA are working hand in hand. There's a lot of companies, I think Volocopter and Lilium are two of the examples, are looking to do sort of bilateral agreements or certifying concurrently. Excuse me. They want to certify and operate in the US, but also they've got a market that they want to operate in the Europe and parts of the UK as well. So it's absolutely crucial that each authority, they're in constant dialogue with one another, and they are, but making sure that they're understanding kind of what needs to be as well. You made a very good point as well, Landry, is that this is an aircraft, as we said, that hasn't been certified before. So they're kind of going into a bit of the unknown. It's a little bit different than this commercial aviation that they're using, because these aircraft are effectively smaller. How will they then fit in the airspace? We've got the commercial airlines that are maybe a couple of thousands of feet above in the air. I'd like to say eVTOL aircraft probably fit in between, sort of kind of that, in between that space as well. It's worth noting also the southern England, or the south of England, is the busiest or one of the most congested airspaces in the whole world. So on top of all the other aircraft that's flying in daily in Europe, all across the world, that must be a great challenge to then try and figure out, well, how do we fit in the aircraft that are maybe at a lower level? And I think, again, we talk about sort of the fifth element and the speed or the volume of operations that we have as well. I think we're going to see sort of very smaller operations to start with. So it might even be that we only have like two or three or four services a day, or enough to make it economically viable in the start, to then increase as we go along as well. So the FAA and the EASA are having to learn kind of like a new type of aircraft as well. I think the good thing though is the FAA are very active. I know that they've been to our events multiple times, which is great. They're having active conversations. So Mike Whitaker, the FAA administrator, has been to Joby. He's sat in one of their aircraft. He's understood what it is. It's worth noting he was previously with Supernal before, so he's got an eVTOL head and he knows kind of the works where it is as well. And it's also another note as well is Billy Nolan, who is the currently Chief Safety Officer at Archer. He was previously the FAA administrator before Mike Whitaker as well. So we're starting to see sort of kind of the really importance of having officials that are either sort of working with the companies and kind of seeing for themselves what it needs to work. And goes back to that dialogue, that face-to-face connections, and seeing what do we need to do, what do you need from us, and here's what we need from you as well. And I know EASA are having a similar dialogues over here in Europe as well, and that just needs to continue to happen as well as we get closer to commercialization. The likes of Archer and the likes of Joby, who will then been there and done that. I also think it's great that they're being as transparent as they are, to then inspire the next companies to come through the wave of commercialization, because that's really important too. Is we want to make sure that they know what it takes to certify, and we as an industry the coinage takes a village to make it all happen. So we all want everyone to succeed, and having that dialogue with the authorities that will inevitably certify the aircraft is crucial. And having those dialogue as early as possible. And I know some companies who we are speaking to with who are maybe not on the same sort of route, or haven't got as far as Joby and Archer, are now already having those conversations. So that's great, because it puts you in touch with them very early on, but it also allows them to ask questions, you to make any changes to your design, but also know that there's no slip-ups. So you won't come to the sort of a crucial part and think, oh, we didn't think about that, or we didn't talk about that. So that harmonization is absolutely critical in terms of making sure that if a company wants to operate in another country, the Civil Aviation Authority knows that what they've done is correct. So that's why then there's the issue with like the CAAC and EASA and FAA all being on the same page as well, because if one of them isn't, it can create a bit of a few issues and enable the industry to take a little bit longer to get there, if that makes sense.
Right. So one of the things we talked about when we were talking about consolidation and so on is, and we saw that those mega groups starting to form, where they're kind of embracing the different roles within the supply chain and the value chain overall, which is quite interesting. But one question I often ask myself, coming from the digital world, is where is digital there? I mean, where is anticipation of a play in digital, which is now, digital is our, it's our twin in a way. So what do you observe in the industry, and how are those professionals anticipating the role of digital in their activities?
Yeah, another really good question, Andrew. Thank you. And I think digital infrastructure is a real key component of the whole advanced air mobility ecosystem as well. Really interesting McKinsey and Company report that I was sort of just reading in the build up to this podcast as well. They were saying that AAM will likely involve more than 50 different activities. So as well as all the various bits that you would do from boarding a flight to things, you include the battery side of things, flight acceptance and scheduling, the flight operations and AT and air traffic management, the vertiports side of things as well. Bit of a sort of a stat as well. So digital infrastructure, it could comprise 5% the total spend of value chain by 2030, similar to that of commercial aviation. It could increase to 30% if mobility services such as customer interfaces for ordering rides are included. Now, I think that would be something that I know that Joby's working on, of course, because they acquired Uber Elevate back in 2020. I know that Volocopter are working on a similar user interface. We want to make that experience as easy as possible, essentially like booking an Uber as you would today in all the cities around the world as well. So, for example, you would order an Uber to get you from point A to point B. You get to your vertiport, or you, as well as the journey, you would look at the flight sort of details. So you would be able to, on an app, whether it's Lyft or Uber, you would choose the Joby or the Volocopter app for whichever company you choose. You can pick your flight, you can pick your time, you can pick which aircraft, you can sort all those bits out. But then you've also got like the boarding, the security side of things as well. How does that all play a part as well? So I think the digital infrastructure is a really key component, and it's all about making sure that passenger journey is as seamless as possible. So we want people to use the services again and again. So if they've had a good experience doing it in the first instance, word of mouth and will spread along with that as well. So it must be better though to handle route diversions and cancellations of flights and missed connections. So a 30-minute delay to a 5-hour flight isn't going to make too much of a difference. 30-minute delay to a 20-minute flight could be a little bit more challenging as well. So a lot of things that the AAM industry that are already working on this to do to handle that as well. And it's also about the demand and capacity in real time, because these flights are going to be going quite regularly. So it's handling the kind of demand that we would have for passengers wanting to use this service. And as you mentioned as well, Landry, it's trying to easy to use and integrated with other apps that are being used as well. So I cannot stress enough how important the digital infrastructure side of things as well. I know CETA are working with companies like UrbanV and Volocopter to enable sort of the digital side of things as well, and which I think is really, really crucial. So I feel like it's often a forgotten topic, but it's something that's really, really crucial to build up that support, that acceptance, and that you want to you want to have this as well. And using an app to book flights here is a simple enough process. Hopefully we can get to that stage, and I know we will for advanced air mobility. So they're just some of the points I had from a digital infrastructure side of things as well.
Yeah, very interesting. One point, we're nearly reaching the end, but there's just two questions left on my side. One is around talent, because we talk about everything, and I like the perspective you have in eVTOL insights on having all those leaders and so on. So talent acquisition for me is going to be crucial, because it's a new industry, new services. So what are the opportunities and challenges do you see with this upcoming sector?
Yeah, again, it's talent acquisition is absolutely crucial. This is a new industry. We want it to succeed, and we want to do everything we can to bring about the benefits of this as well. So, Vertical Flight Society, Mike Hirschberg and Angelo Collins and the team there do an incredible job of educating and showing everyone all the values of vertical flight as well. They sort of did sort of report, or certainly talked about the likes of that. We need 10,000 engineers in the next decade to fill the surplus of requirements. And that's not to say, and I know in the aerospace industry as a whole, I know there is a bit of a deficit of engineers coming in, that are retiring, and it's trying to fill the void of young and hungry engineers that are coming into that as well. I think the thing is, the issues that are coming up as well is traditional recruitment may not be sufficient. So it might not be that we can just go into the aerospace universities or the colleges and attract people in there as well. We would need maybe to branch out a little bit further and sort of see how else we can do that as well. And that's why it's so important that we're keeping on top of the diversity, equality and inclusivity sort of spectrum in terms of what we're trying to do for this industry as well. So the greater responsibility and direct impact on the aircraft, that's a really big plus for anyone that wants to get into the industry. However, then you've got the market volatility and then also the job security as well, because it's still very small but also quite niche too. I think there's an overwhelming amount of opportunities in this as well. Whether you're building the aircraft, I think it's a great opportunity to say for a youngster who is fascinated by aviation, wants to get into the space, to then say to them, well, how do you feel like working on an aircraft that will be, the first in its era, electric aviation, to then be used by people who would be using it for years and years and decades to come as well. It's quite a really sort of fascinating proposition as well. But we also need to make sure that we're doing everything we can to make sure that we're telling them about the advantages of it as well. So a lot of the events that we do moderate, and I know a lot of the other industry events as well, talking about what are other companies doing from it as well. So it's opening the pool out. It's I know Archer and Joby do a lot of internships and do a lot of recruitment within the local area as well. So going back to the Covington from Archer and the Ohio announcement with Joby when it comes to manufacturing is hiring locally. There's more jobs to be coming about there as well. So it's quite a market where you see a lot of movement between the different companies coming in with the actual manufacturing and supply chain side of things. 10,000 engineers seems a lot, but again, there's I know there's certainly in the UK there's Flight Crowd, there's also the Community Mobility Initiative, or CAMI, in the US. They're doing a lot of educational purposes that are going into education institutes, going into sort of their local trade and sort of governments to inspire the next generation, because essentially that's what we need to do, is those ones that are maybe coming to the end of their career, trying to replace them then with those that are wanting to sort of do that as well. And another point, if you don't mind me saying as well, Landry, about the pilots, there's a bit of a pilot shortage as well, and a lot of conversations talking about that as well. Is I sort of wonder whether there might be an opportunity for those pilots that might be retiring, is rather than having like the 5-hour flights or the 12-hour flights from the commercial aviation, eVTOL pilots, I believe it's very easy to sort of handle or to pilot an eVTOL aircraft with fewer controls or fewer components, but also you won't be flying as long. So heard a really interesting call from Bonnie Simi at one of the event that I went to last year and she was talking about bringing the retired pilots back, where the impact they had on their families was quite great. If they were traveling quite a lot of time on flying these aircraft, the commercial aircraft, you have a lot of time away from the family. But with eVTOL aircraft, you not be traveling or not be flying as much. You can actually pick and choose which operations you want to use. So having that time with family is precious and you don't get that back. So maybe that's kind of one segment where bringing in the retired pilots who have got dozens and dozens of years of experience to fly an aircraft that's much more simpler, but gives them that work-life balance that they maybe didn't have when flying the commercial aviation that they might get with eVTOL aircraft. So that's just some of the ideas from a talent acquisition, but very important. I can see that continue to sort of be at the thought of everyone's minds as we get closer to the sort of the commercialization side.
Yeah, and for the talent, for the engineers, I mean, in France, for example, it takes 5 years to train engineers, so it's quite a long time. But it brings me to the idea that we should maybe also rethink. There will be some new types of job, new type of engineers where
Yes.
it's maybe more specialized. Maybe you don't need 5 years to be trained. Maybe 2 years, on a very specific case. Be a bit more agile on that. Yeah, definitely. I'd like to now go to the area of an investment perspective, which is going to drive us progressively to the conclusion of this podcast. And the first thing we touch base quickly is, on the investor side, what are the expectations you hear today on the return on investment? Because there's been a lot of money, poured into those projects. I mean, it's quite huge, which is normal. I mean, you're in aviation, which, it's partly there's infrastructure and it's large research projects. But, what are the talks about now? And do you sense some doubts? And is it now, due to those doubts, becoming very challenging for any new project to come on board and to raise funds, for example?
Yeah, financing is a really key topic as well, Andrew, and it's a really fascinating one as well. So I think it was 2021 or even might have been 2022, but certainly a couple of years ago, a lot of money was being pumped into this space as well. You saw a lot of special acquisition companies purchasing companies, the likes of Archer, the likes of Joby, the likes of Eve, Lilium for that matter too, and their valuations were billions and billions of dollars as well. So a lot of money was in there, generated a lot of interest, and I think that's kind of helped in a way with the media mainstream. So as I've mentioned before as well, we're seeing a lot of non-industry outlets going, flying car, eVTOL aircraft, what could this be? What is this new aviation transport? So it really put us in a really good spotlight for then other companies to come forward and go, we need a piece of this lucrative pie. And as we said at the start, it could be worth potentially $90 billion by 2050, maybe even more because of the other companies that are in this space as well. So a lot of companies are looking to get a slice of this very lucrative pie, and understandably so as well. The issue we do have, though, as well, is maybe there might be a bit of investor fatigue, that there's been already a lot of investment in that. And because there's a bit of pushback on kind of when this industry is going to start, is it going to be 2025? Is it going to be 2026? There's no definitive firm answer of when exactly it's going to happen. So I can understand the investor's perspective where they want to get that return on investment as soon as possible, but the company can't really give them, they can give them a year or can give them a guarantee of when it's likely to happen, but they just can't give them an exact figure as well. So that can be, I can understand, a little bit of challenging from the investor. But however, we are still starting to see some investors in. So, Stellantis investing more in Archer. I know there's other investments. I think we reported on a few stories earlier this week where companies that have already invested in this space have invested in other companies as well. So that's promising to see. I think where the issue will be, and it kind of goes along to like the consolidation side of things as well, Landry, is it costs an incredible amount of money to build and certify and develop an aircraft. You get, I would imagine, you get a series fundraising round, and most of that would be spent on R&D, technology, flight testing, amongst other things as well. So how do you then convince or try and persuade more investors or the same investor to invest more money to deliver on the promises or the projects that you're working on as well? I couldn't do it. I think it's a really, I admire and I would fully respect all the companies that are working hard to make this as well. And on the consolidation side, it might be that we do see some companies sadly not quite get to the level that they need to in terms of financing to make a viable project. Hopefully that's not the case, but I just think we have to be a little bit realistic in terms of where we could see the market in the next 5 years. So, and I know a lot of industry leaders have said the same, is that we will start to see a consolidation. Many have said that 2024 is the year where we start to see that, start to see a little bit more of a, separating the wheat from the chaff in terms of where the main companies are and where those that just will fall unfortunately short as well. So it's just all about the proposition as well, is with the aircraft and the flight testing. I think as we're getting closer and we can actually demonstrate, now we're in a position where rather than telling people it's going to happen, we can actually show them. So, Joby and Archer are doing the flight testing. Eve are looking to do flight testing later this year. EHang do a lot of flight testing as well. So having the visuals there to tell people that this is what we're doing, and obviously the transparency with the financials, and because a lot of money in the early stages, of course, is being spent on all the work leading up to commercialization. So it's that profit again that people are looking at too, is, well, you're losing a lot of money. Well, when are you going to start making money? And of course, we want the operations to be done sooner, so then all the money that's then been spent to get to this stage can then be clawed back and put back in from the profit side. So this year, I think, will be really interesting from a finance perspective. I think the mainstream media has done a great job in advertising it to the wider public, but I do think there'll be some casualties potentially in the next couple of years. But hopefully, I'm proved wrong, as I know I've been done in the past as well. So, but financing is a fascinating topic, Landry, and I know that a lot of people will be watching the market, seeing kind of where the dips are in the stock market, but also when will be a good time to invest as well. So, it's certainly an interesting year, and I know it will get even more interesting as the years go on.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I would be even more excited by the fact that those projects will create new opportunities in domains around those projects, because
Absolutely.
and I think this is where to watch, because it's true that the valuation might be a bit high for the front runners, and whereas the ones coming now could be challenging. Because the front runners are quite innovative to some extent,
Yes.
so you have a barrier to so probably maybe the aside industry which are supporting those new projects are maybe interesting to look at. Which brings me then to the last question of this podcast that we've reached. It was really interesting. I wish I could speak hours more about it.
Thank you.
We have to we have to go towards the end. So, just as a conclusion, if I'm an investor or just someone who's interested to join or to be active in this new industry, what advice would you give as a starting point?
Yeah, well, first of all, I'd love it if anyone is interested in the eVTOL space to head to our website, evtolinsights.com, where you can get all the updates on our website. We've got the newsletter on LinkedIn, but also on our subscription, which you can do via our website as well. So shameless plug, Landry, I'm sorry, but that'll be certainly from all the work that we've done, and to keep you up to date on all the space as well. I think the main advice really, Landry, is just to be a sponge, really immerse yourself in this industry. So social media is your best friend when it comes to learning about things. There's an incredible amount of people in this space that are huge knowledge experts when it comes to this space as well. We all want this to succeed. That's absolutely paramount. So I would suggest sort of do a sort of a bit more of a deep dive into the companies that you're interested in. So the Jobys, the EHangs, the Archers, the Whisks, the Beta Technologies, just utilize that as well. And then, because everyone's very transparent in kind of what they're doing as well. And there's a whole host of white papers that are around as well. So I'm sure a quick Google search on sort of white papers, eVTOL, a lot of companies are doing a lot of these documents that you can learn a lot about, so you can finalize a little bit more about understanding batteries or understanding the challenges when it comes to eVTOLs and the challenges with public acceptance and government stuff as well. Worth noting, NASA, interestingly, they do their national sort of campaign. They've got a lot of an advanced air mobility page where you can learn more about sort of the industry as well. As I said, the Uber Elevate white paper I think is a really good starting point. So if you're completely unfamiliar with this topic, to read that, it's quite a meaty read, but there's a few good bits that you can pick up as well. And those co-authors that were part of it, so Ian Villa, Mark Moore, they're now set up their own company, Whisper Aero, and Nickel Go is Chief Commercial Officer of Archer as well. So they've since gone on to really big companies as well. So I'd suggest just do as much research as you can. Like the internet is a great way. Happy for people to reach out to me on LinkedIn and sort of drop me an email as well. But yeah, websites are great stuff from our starting point, Landry, but also LinkedIn as well, where you'll be able to find a lot more of the companies that are working in this space as well. So I know Whisk do a lot of white papers and blogs. I know Archer the same, Joby the same. There's a lot of people out there that are willing to help. So you'll find a plethora of knowledge at your disposal to make really good ideas and voice your own opinions and thoughts on this wonderful market.
Fantastic. Yeah, I'll do my own shame, and also creating value in travel and transportation. We'll also follow this topic very closely, of course. So, well, it's been an amazing journey with you, Jason. I wish we had a day basically but unfortunately we have to, be bound to the limits of that podcast. So, really warm thank you. It's been I really appreciate the time. Well, I'm proposing you maybe another meeting in 2026 to do,
Definitely.
where do we stand? So it would be really interesting. And anyway, again, thank you very much.
No, my pleasure, Landry. It's been an absolute pleasure. Love being able to talk about the eVTOL space, and for giving me the opportunity to tell us more about eVTOL insights and the wonderful market. So yeah, thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye, everyone, and see you at the next episode. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching or listening to the podcast, Creating Value in Travel and Transportation, from Fairval. If you enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to it. We welcome your support, feedback, and suggestions, and we hope to see you at the next podcast. Fairval, Creating Value in Travel and Transportation.